We live in a world where millions of people wake up, unlock their phones, and immediately check what someone else is doing, what they're wearing, what they're eating, what they recommend, what they think, who they're dating, how they live. And somehow, complete strangers have gained something that used to belong only to close friends, family, or celebrities: our attention, our trust, and in many cases, our identity. But that raises a bigger question. What exactly is happening inside the mind of an influencer? Why do some people become obsessed with being watched, admired, followed, and validated by people they've never met? Because the psychology of the influencer is not just about fame, it's about validation, identity, performance, comparison, and emotional dependency. At first glance, influencing looks simple. You post videos, you share opinions, you show your life, people follow you, brands pay you, end of story. But psychologically, something much more interesting is happening. The influencer isn't just creating content, they are turning themselves into a product, not just their ideas, not just their skills, their personality, their image, their lifestyle, their relationships, their emotions. And once your identity becomes your product, something changes. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "What version of me performs best?" That's a dangerous shift. Because from that point on, your personality can slowly become shaped not by authenticity, but by engagement. What gets more likes? What gets more shares? What keeps people emotionally invested? And this is where the line between a person and a performance starts to blur. But here's where it gets deeper. For many influencers, this isn't just strategy. It becomes psychological reinforcement. Human beings are wired to seek approval. That's normal. We all want to feel seen, accepted, and valued. But social media doesn't just offer approval. It offers approval in measurable form: likes, views, comments, shares, followers, brand deals. Every notification becomes a tiny reward that tells the brain, "You matter, people care, people are watching, keep going." That creates a powerful loop. Post something, get attention, feel validated, then engagement drops, and suddenly you want that feeling back. So you post again. This is one of the most important things to understand about influencer psychology. Many influencers are not just chasing money or fame. They're chasing a psychological state, the feeling of being seen. And when that feeling becomes part of your emotional stability, silence starts to feel threatening. A normal person can disappear for a few days and feel like they're resting. An influencer may disappear for a few days and feel like they're becoming irrelevant. That fear explains a lot of influencer behavior that looks irrational from the outside. It explains why some influencers overshare, why they post constantly, why they turn every moment into an update, why private pain becomes public content. Because at some point, the audience stops being just an audience. It becomes a mirror. And that's where things get even more psychologically interesting. The influencer doesn't just shape the audience starts shaping the influencer. If thousands of people reward you every time you act funny, vulnerable, controversial, attractive, or relatable, eventually you'll feel pressure to keep being that version of yourself. Not necessarily because you're lying, but because that version works. Over time, the influencer can become trapped inside a character that started as a strategy but slowly becomes an identity. The funny one can't be serious anymore. The polished one can't show failure. The healed one can't have a breakdown. The relatable one has to keep exposing more and more of their life to stay relatable. Now the influencer isn't just making content, they're managing expectations, and expectations can become a prison. Because once people follow you for a specific version of you, changing becomes risky, evolving becomes risky, being quiet becomes risky. Even being honest can become risky if honesty no longer matches the brand your audience expects. But there's another shift that may be even darker. At some point, many influencers stop fully living their lives and start mentally scanning them for content. A trip becomes content, a breakup becomes content, an argument becomes content, a family moment becomes content, a mental health struggle becomes content, even grief can become content. And once that happens, life starts splitting in two. There's the experience itself, and then there's the online version of the experience. That changes the way a person relates to reality. Instead of asking, "How do I feel?" they may start asking, "How will this be perceived?" Instead of being present in the moment, They're observing it from outside, almost like a producer. Instead of processing an emotion privately, they may feel pressure to package it publicly. And this creates one of the strangest effects of influencer culture. A person can become more connected to the performance of their life than to the life itself. Not every influencer reaches that point, but when they do, the consequences can be severe. Burnout, anxiety, emotional numbness, identity confusion, and the constant feeling of never being fully off. Because if your life is your product, then rest can feel unproductive, and privacy can feel like wasted content. And all of this leads to what I think is the central trap of influencer psychology: confusing attention with self-worth. Attention feels powerful. It feels like proof. Proof that you matter. Proof that you're attractive, interesting, successful, funny, desirable, relevant. But attention is not the same as identity. It's not the same as love, and it's definitely not the same as inner stability. The problem is that attention is unstable. The algorithm changes. People get bored. Another creator rises. Engagement drops. The audience moves on. And when a person has built too much of their self-esteem on being watched, those changes don't just affect their career. They affect their sense of self. That's when the real crisis begins. Because now the question isn't just, why are my views down? It becomes, am I losing relevance? Do people still care about me? Who am I if no one is watching? That last question is the one that matters most. Because if a person no longer knows who they are without an audience, then the audience has stopped being a group of followers. It has become an emotional support system. Because in the end, the influencer isn't just influencing other people. Very often, they're also being shaped, constantly, invisibly, and sometimes destructively, by the attention they were chasing in the first place. And maybe the most important question isn't, why do influencers act this way? Maybe it's this: what happens to a person when being watched becomes more important than being real?